Good morning, everybody. Rather an unusual setup this morning, as you will have noticed. The proceedings are going to be broadcast on live stream, but only an audio broadcast. There will be no video broadcast, and this afternoon's evidence will be subject to voice modulation. Those in the hearing room who would ordinarily see the witness as he or she gives evidence will not do so today to protect the privacy of the two witnesses from whom we're going to hear. Those of you who have mobile electronic devices may use them to transmit what you hear in the hearing room, but only after 10 minutes have elapsed, so as to fit in with the live stream by which our proceedings are distributed. The devices may not be used to record our proceedings. Yeah.
Can you hear me, B?
I can.
I understand that you're affirming today.
Sorry, I can't hear you well.
I understand that you're taking an affirmation today for your evidence.
I am, yes.
Please repeat after me. I do solemnly,
I do solemnly,
sincerely and truly
sincerely and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that the evidence I shall give
that the evidence I shall give
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth,
the whole truth,
and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Throughout this hearing, I'll be referring to you as B because your real name has been restricted for privacy.
Thank you.
Do you recall providing a witness statement to the inquiry dated the 1st of April 2024?
Yes, I did.
And are you familiar with the contents of that statement?
Yes.
And can you confirm that the contents of that statement are true and correct to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes, they're true and correct.
Thank you. We'll start off, B, with just some background. You say in your witness statement that you've been involved in campaigns for various causes since you were 16 or 17. Is that correct?
Yes.
And those causes include social justice, anti-apartheid, saving the environment, and peace and equality.
Mm-hmm.
You also say that you've been involved in campaigning groups such as Greenpeace, CND, Amnesty International, and other local and national campaigns. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Broadly speaking, and obviously you can only give a very rough figure, but over the years, how much of your spare time would you say that you're devoted to this type of campaigning activity?
That's quite hard to enumerate, really, because there's been times when there's been big campaigns or there's been, political crises, things going on. So, but I don't know, maybe 10%.
Yeah, but has it been?
I have a life as well. Yes.
Has it been a current running through your life, essentially, that you've been involved in?
Always, yes.
Consistently.
Like even from before, yes, even as a child.
And B, you said in your witness statement that you're proud of your participation in this activity. Can you just explain why you're proud of it?
Because I've always felt that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I've always been aware of injustices in society. And I'm proud of the fact that I have played my small part in trying to make a more just society, a more fair and equal one, and been involved in many campaigns that I think are absolutely relevant and important. And I wanted to make the world a better, fairer place. I always have.
Thanks. Thank you. B, if we turn now to your involvement in the SWP,
Mm-hmm.
I understand from your witness statement and also from some of Trevor Morris's reporting that from around March 1992, you did occasional part-time work in the print shop. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that telesales work?
Yes. I had only attended my first meeting in March 1992, and they were looking for someone at the print shop to just do a bit of part-time telesales. I wasn't very successful, at that. It just involved, just phoning print shops. I'd worked as a printer before, was familiar with the way that printing was organised, and also to try and sell, some other aspects that was offered at the print shop.
Sure.
According to, if I may call him Bobby, because
Yes.
Bobby was how I always knew him as. I was promoted very quickly, within a month of my first meeting, to being the media officer or the communications officer, which was kind of quite laughable and set the tone for a very false narrative, which is what I read.
Yes, I'll explore that. His account of your position. B, was this paid work that you did at the print shop?
Yes, but it wasn't. I think it was probably only a couple of days a week.
Right. And you joined the SWP soon after, a matter of weeks after you started doing this work in the print shop?
Yes.
And can I ask why? What prompted you to join the SWP?
I felt I'd found my tribe in a way. I found a group of people who felt the same way that I did and were actually getting things done. It was like both democratic and efficient. They were able to respond very quickly to things that needed responded to. For instance, if the news that a nursery was going to be closed locally, we were very quickly able to organise people to campaign for that. That was something that's close to my heart because my children were babies at the time, really. I'd also, I don't know if you want a bit of history where what had happened just before then. So I had just become a single mother. I just separated from my ex-husband 6 months previously. I'd been living in Jamaica with him. So I'd moved to Hackney, didn't really know anybody there. I was completely consumed really with bringing up my children on a very small income. At the time I was unable to work initially. Yes, I saw a programme on the television sort of late at night, which featured David Widgery, who was a socialist, a member of the SWP, who lived in Hackney, actually talking about how joining a revolutionary organisation, the importance to him. And it really rang true for me. I just wanted to make a change. This seemed like an organisation that where I would be able to do things. It was my birthday. It was my best friend had been a member of the SWP for some time, since she was at university in Oxford, and so I sort of put two and two together and attended this meeting. And that changed my life in many ways, because I felt I was able to be an active member of society again, and be able to be active in campaigning and in generally trying to promote social justice. And I met people locally. I felt like I was part of a community. It was wonderful, really.
So it gave you emotional support as well as giving you an outlet for campaigning and wanting to make the world a better place.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
Can I ask, which branch did you join?
Well, it was Dalston branch originally. At that time, I think there was only maybe 2 or 3 branches in Hackney, but soon after my relationship was ended or coming to an end, it split into several different branches. So I think there was maybe 7 or 8 branches in Hackney. There were so many people in the SWP, particularly in Hackney.
And did becoming a member, what did that entail? Was that just a matter of signing a form? As far as you recall.
I think so, yes. Signing a form paying subs. I don't think they were very much in my case because I wasn't working.
Sure.
Yes, there was no kind of cloak and dagger initiation. It was just
Yeah.
like joining any organisation.
Sure.
You signed a form, paid your subs, and that was it.
Did you have to give any sort of commitment in terms of the amount of time you might be able to devote to the branch, or was it fairly relaxed, as in you could just participate as much as you were able to?
It was fairly relaxed. I had 2 babies. Obviously, I wasn't able to be to commit more that much time. I didn't have a whole lot of babysitters. I didn't have my family around me. The branch provided a babysitter so I could attend weekly meetings, which was amazing because I hadn't actually been out at all in the 6 months before that, since I moved back to London. And I took so things that I could take the children to. So, for instance, we did a weekly paper sales, and the kids would come along to that. But I didn't get involved in sort of industrial sales or knocking on doors and things like that because of my commitment to the children. I was able to be quite involved in local campaigns. So, for instance, when the closing of the nurseries, closing of libraries, that sort of thing, because I could take the children along. I was limited in the sort of bigger demonstrations what I could go to.
But on a local level, you could get involved to some extent.
Yeah.
And you found that campaigning bore fruit in the sense that actually some of those campaigns were successful.
Yes.
Taking it on to the more sort of macro level, for want of a better word, what was your understanding be? I think you were a member of the SWP from 1992 to 2007, you say in your witness statement.
Yes, in varying levels of commitment.
Sure. What did you understand to be the aims of the SWP on a fairly high level?
To promote socialism from below, to create. I mean, that obviously it was a revolutionary party, but I'm not sure how many of us actually believed that we were on the brink of revolution. Right. That was the ultimate. Aim would be to have a fair, just society with which was led by the people rather than by the need to make profit. I entirely believed in that. I'm not sure that I believed the revolution was around the corner, but I believed in the principle.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question, whether you thought the revolution was imminent, but I understand that you didn't, really. But in your witness statement, you say that the SWP didn't use violence to advance its aims, though as a revolutionary party, they did foresee a time when theoretically violence might hypothetically be necessary to realise its aims in the event of revolution. Is that a reference to Chile, or are you referring to something else? Chile as an example.
Yes, it was about. I mean, I think actually, that revolution doesn't necessitate violence. Very few people, for instance, were killed in the Russian Revolution, but sometimes it's necessary to protect itself, to maintain a revolutionary socialist society because of the attacks from the forces of capital.
So, as in Chile, whereas Pinochet, that it might have been necessary in that instance to protect the socialist government.
Yes, but I mean, there was no way that we were in any way trained or envisaged any violence. We were like, most of us were pacifists. We were just like a bunch of people who cared about our community and who cared about society.
And you'll be aware that Trevor Morris, or Bobby as you knew him, said in his witness statement that the aim of the SWP was to overthrow the government by non-democratic means. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I think, overthrow, it just means to change, really. by non-democratic. I mean, I think that the revolution from socialism from below is absolutely democratic, much more democratic than our current parliamentary system can be, particularly, without proportional representation. And, you only need to look at the last election where the Labour Party, for instance, got actually less votes than they did in the previous election, but because of the low turnout for the Tories and so on, and the way the votes were distributed, they got a massive majority. That doesn't really, where there are other parties, including far right parties, had a massive vote turnout, but very few seats. I don't think. Yeah. I think it's quite clear that the current system is not altogether democratic.
This idea of revolution from below, what do you mean by that exactly? Is that organising amongst communities to sort of organise things in a socialist way and then to reform the institutions from within? Is that what that means?
Yes, I think, the SWP would call it from the workers. Other organisations, for instance, we'll talk about citizens' assemblies and so on. And so yes, group that people that that people power, I suppose. Sure. That's the change comes from below and is not imposed from above by what the SWP would refer to as the ruling class, what I might call the establishment, which is so entrenched that it's very difficult for any change to come. To come.
Thank you. And you've actually covered this, I think, Bea, but just to make it absolutely clear. So when you were a member of the SWP, you didn't witness or hear about any practical steps being taken to further the revolution in terms of arming yourselves or military training or anything of that kind?
Sorry. No. No. That's, absolutely not. No.
Yeah.
We weren't even very fit, most of us.
Sorry?
We weren't even, it wasn't even like we were into sort of fitness, let alone arming ourselves.
Yeah. If we move now to public disorder, I'd like to bring this up, actually, this document, please, which is UCPI 33830. The bottom of page 7, please. And this is actually an SDS briefing document dated the 5th of April 1993. And it reads, the relevant section reads, SWP leaders may provoke others present into action, but generally the organisation does not pose a serious risk to public order. And I'm bringing this up really, Bea, just because this is obviously an SDS document. So this was the SDS view at the material time, at the time when you were in the SWP. And I don't think we need to bring these up, but in the annual reports from this period, this idea is echoed. So, for example, in the 1992-93 annual report, it says of the SWP that it does not in itself pose any major threat to public disorder. And in the annual report for the following year, 1993 to 94, it says at paragraph 2.21, it does not in itself, the SWP, pose any major threat to public order. And then it says something else, which I don't need to read now. But taking this into consideration, I mean, we can see from these documents that the SDS didn't consider the SWP to present in itself a risk to public order. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely, and I know this had been. I haven't seen that document before, but I know that from 1985, there was pressure to close the SD, or it was seen that really the SWP didn't pose a risk, and yet it sort of beggars belief that it continued year after year and was signed off year after year by the Home Office, even after I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the report was in 1985 that suggested that SWP was not a violent organisation, and that so much money was went to spy on the left wing and environmental and and anti-nuclear and anti-apartheid society. It's just incredible. And I was really horrified to see that Bobby played a big part in trying to promote the continuance of spying on the left. And that really upset me, because I kind of believe that he must surely have had, at the very least, have had sympathy and some understanding. He was around us all the time talking about ideas of social justice. It's just so horrible and upsetting to think that in his mind he's talking to us, believing that we're subversives and violent, dangerous people, and reporting on us as if we are. That was just horrific.
There's an implication in the quote that I read you, but elsewhere, and I'll take you to those, that whilst the SWP in itself isn't a violent organisation, that it might provoke others to violence. So just the relevant bit in the extract that I just brought up was, it started off, SWP leaders may provoke others present into action. And I'll refer you just to two sections from Bobby's witness statement. And Bobby, sorry, I obviously mean Trevor Morris, but I'm calling him Bobby because that's how you knew him. So in his witness statement, which is 35076, and it's page 75, paragraph 85C, he says of the SWP, whilst it tried to avoid being associated with violence, it often promoted or encouraged the use of violence, particularly by others, to achieve its aims. And I'll just read you another section, which is on page 137, and it's paragraph 190A. And he says, it was my view that the SWP sought to take credit for anything, and it pursued a strategy of instigating incidents whilst protecting senior SWP officials from being identified as involved. So my question for you, B, is during your time with the SWP, did you see or hear anything which supports this view of SWP leaders or SWP members instigating or inciting others to be violent?
I mean, I'm not quite sure what he means by that. How would the leaders, by whom I assume he means the Central Committee, instigate violence from other people? My understanding was very clearly from the start that the SWP is a non-violent organisation which fights with numbers and not with violence, and the importance was to have mass mobilisation, and that direct action or violence of any sort would be counter-revolutionary because it would stop people from joining. It wasn't a small splinter sort of terrorist group. It was about getting ordinary people to join, and ordinary people aren't going to join if they think they're going to go to a demonstration and get beaten up. So I don't understand. I don't understand that. I have been involved in I went to Greenham Common, for instance, a couple of times, where direct action. I am in favour sometimes of direct action, and I think it worked, for instance, at Greenham Common. Yeah. And I remember having those arguments at the beginning, of saying, why don't we do direct action at all? And being told, no, this is about mass mobilisation. This is about working the community. This is about being open and friendly and and bringing people because we were involved in the campaigns that people care about. So violence would have been completely counterproductive. And this kind of idea about the leadership, working in this kind of sinister way, it is just completely alien to me. I don't understand. I don't understand where that comes from. I also don't understand how Bobby sort of feels that he has this this relationship with the leadership, because as I understand it, he was just a rank and file member. He wasn't in the inner circles at all. So I don't know how he can sort of be reporting. There's several reports, several references to what was happening to secret meetings and so on in the inner circle. But I don't think that Bobby was anywhere near the inner circle. He never did the kind of things that the leaders would do, like write books and lead meetings, do meetings at Marxism. He had no sort of particular intellectual or political experience. He wasn't one of those people. He was a useful and a friendly person. He had a car. He was involved in things. He had an infectious smile and laugh, and we liked him. But he was one of us. He wasn't in the this kind of secret cabal of leadership that he refers to.
So was it not your impression then that he was being teed up to sort of lead the A&L, for example, in East London or anything of that sort?
I wasn't particularly active in the A&L, but I don't think so at all. As in my understanding, I don't think he had any leadership role there. But I think he had time, so he did, because of his kind of work, which was purportedly doing this sort of freelance work, DJing and German translation. He had the time to spend in the office there, and I'm sure that he did his part and administratively and so on.
Yes, thanks. I mean, you have answered this, Bea, but it's just to make it absolutely clear that from what you saw and heard, what was the SWP's attitude to violent direct action? Because obviously there's a distinction between non-violent direct action, as you referred to at Green McCommon, and violent direct action. What was their attitude to squadists, for example, or those people who wanted to take violent direct actions against the extreme right wing?
Well, that was completely against the party policy, and in fact, there had been a group back in the 1970s, I think, who wanted to take direct action, and they were chucked out of the party and became a Red Action, I think. So within the bulk of the party, it was absolutely anti the policy of the party, which was about mass mobilization, was about being open and welcoming and involved in the community and in social justice campaigns.
Thank you. I'd just like to bring this up. It's on the same topic, but it's document reference UCPI 28019, and it's a report dated the 24th of June 1994. It's not in your bundle, sir. It's page 2, paragraph 1 of that report. And it's not actually coming up here, but I can just read you the relevant bit, Bea. It reads that the SWP's Chris Bambury had compiled a, quote, list of physically competent comrades to form an organised security unit to defend the SWP and the A&L. And Trevor Morris says in this report that even though this idea was vetoed by Julie Waterson, and then, quote, the issue of a more physical confrontational facility within the SWP/ANL will not disappear, and there is growing sympathy towards the idea within the rank and file of both the SWP and the ANL. What do you say to that? Were you aware of any growing sympathy to this idea?
I mean, not at all. And I don't know what... I mean, Bobby seems to really dislike Chris Bambury. There's so much very derogatory references to him.
Did you know Chris Bambury? Sorry to interrupt.
Well, he worked at I knew him through the print shop, but I didn't really know him, on a personal level particularly. But I mean, I can't comment definitively, other than that I didn't know that there was any relationship between Chris Banbury and Bobby. And although Chris, he might have sounded kind of quite strident and very Scottish, that he was, absolutely in line with everybody else. And as Lindsay German said, there was no. I don't think that there was any either relationship between Chris and Bobby, or that he would in any way want to promote something that would be risk the mass mobilisation and the mass movement.
Understood. B, we'll look now just briefly at the idea of entryism, or this idea that Trevor Morris touches upon of the SWP sort of exploiting campaigns for its own ends. This pops up a couple of times in his reporting and in his witness statement. But he says, I don't think I need to bring it up, but it's paragraph 1 of his witness statement, where he says, although I was doing a service for the country, I realised I had a general dislike of the police. Luckily for me, that was topped by me realising the SWP were using me and people of my colour for their own ends. I'll just give you another example. It's the same in his witness statement, this time paragraph 142. And he's talking here about his reporting on justice campaigns. And he says, the purpose of me providing information on any of these groups was solely because of the involvement or interest by SWP and ANL in furthering their aims by getting into these groups. SWP attempted to get into any group or organisation that it thought it could use to achieve its aims of fracturing the system and bring about socialism. That's why I would have reported on these. So, again, what you witnessed, and from your time in the SWP, did you see or hear anything to suggest that the SWP's involvement in these campaigns was somehow inauthentic, that it was a means to an end?
I mean, it's so ironic, isn't it, really? Entryism and infiltration, that involves... That's about secretly becoming part of a group in order to get information and influence others, which is exactly what Bobby and others in the SDS were doing. That was infiltration. Of course, members want to get involved in their trade unions and so on, and in campaigns. Firstly, because we were absolutely sincere about what we wanted to do. There was no kind of cynicism. There was no kind of self-serving. We totally believed in social justice. But nobody was pretending to be anything other than what they were, or to believe anything other than what they were. It's just so ironic and so cynical that that a spy uses those terms. I'm sorry, but I mean, the other thing is about the race issue. I read this that he said that that he felt that he was used because of the colour of his skin. I just think, a couple of things about that. I just wonder if he'd ever met anybody who actually believed in their community, who actually believed in making a better society, who was actually authentic. You join a justice campaign because you believe in justice, not because you want to further your aims or whatever. Or whatever, self-serving is a term that he uses. Which again is so ironic because it seems that this group of spies were so, and particularly Bobby, was just so self-serving in the way he presented his information. And the other issue about race, I have to bring this up, is that he talks about his experience of racism in the police, which we understand that there is institutional, or has been certainly institutional racism in the police. the police are in effect protecting the overtly racist organisation, the BNP at Welling. He and is an absolutely anti-racist organisation. I can't but believe he must have been so conflicted in this inauthenticity that he was effectively protecting a racist organisation whilst spying on an overtly anti-racist organisation that believed passionately in equal rights and in anti-apartheid and you know, decent people spending their spare time campaigning for equality that should be undermined in that way in his reports.
That actually leads into the next topic I wanted to cover with you, B, which is this idea of secrecy. And again, you've touched on this, but just to clarify, from what you saw in the SWP, was it a secretive organisation at all?
No, I mean that's so important, because I just could not believe that public money was being spent on an organisation which was absolutely open, had no secrets. Of course it had no secrets, because when you want to build something, you want to be welcoming, you want to be open. There was no secrets. You know, we had a weekly newspaper. Everything was there in the newspaper. We had party notes, which would, you know, every branch meeting, we'd have a party notes. That wasn't a secret. That wasn't a secret document. I'm not aware of any secrets in the organisation. I'm not aware of anything that would justify massive amounts of taxpayers' money to send spies in to infiltrate an organisation which was absolutely authentic and open.
Did it have private meetings, as far as you know? Meetings
Well,
that
no.
members... No.
Was he refers to a private meeting that he attended, but I was not aware that there was any private meetings. I absolutely don't believe that there would be private meetings. Of course, there was central committee meetings, but you know, everything that went on there was publicised. You know, you can't grow a movement on secrets.
Yeah, thank you. Was the SWP concerned about its security, as far as you could tell?
No. Tony Cliff, who was still alive at that time, who was the leader, used to sort of say, well, you know, let them send in spies. You know, there's nothing to spy on. You know, it was almost like a joke. But I don't think, although, you know, that was, he would say it as a joke, I don't think that he really believed that there were infiltrators, and certainly not infiltrators who would make relationships with women.
Indeed. And as far as you know, B, you may not know about this, but when the SWP was involved in organising marches or protests, as far as you know, did it liaise with the police in terms of the routes of the march, the numbers expected, that sort of information? Did it provide it?
Yes, I believe so, especially in the large marches, yes. But obviously, as I understand it.
Yes. Just briefly, beyond your activities when you were in the SWP, again, roughly, in the period that you knew Trevor Morris, how much of your time were you devoting to SWP activities, would you say?
I mean, I had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, so I was fairly limited. I would do definitely a paper sale on Saturday, if I possibly could.
Yeah.
And I'd attend a meeting on Wednesday, I think it was.
Is that weekly?
Yes.
Yes. And in terms of marches and protests, did you take part in many of those?
I mean, I've always been a protester. At that time, probably less than at many other times in my life, just because my children were so small.
Of course.
You know, I can remember. I've got pictures of a campaign to keep Bart's Hospital open, for instance. I think it was maybe the A&E or a department in Bart's. There was a campaign to keep the library open, to keep the nurseries open. There was my local nursery, actually the one that my daughter went to, was closed down, but there was less closures than there would have been, I believe, if there hadn't been those sort of campaigns.
Sure. And what was the mood like when you did participate in a public protest or march? Can I ask, was the mood peaceful, vociferous? How would you describe it?
Generally, yes, apart from Welling.
Yes, we'll come to Welling. So yes, save for Welling. I should have made that clear.
Yeah.
So, sorry, did you say it was generally peaceful?
Yes.
Right. And I think you refer in your witness statement to taking your children to some of the protests. So was that something you did often, or was that?
You can ask them. They have many experiences of protesting, of going on protests. Yes, it was kind of like an afternoon out.
Right. But I suppose the point is you felt able to take your children on the protests.
Yes.
There was a social scene associated with the SWP, is that right?
Yeah.
And was that mainly branch focused, or did it cross branch lines, or was it mainly you socialised with people from your branch?
Yeah. Yes.
And
so it was mainly having a drink after a meeting, for instance. But some of those people, my comrades from that time, actually have become my best friends, and we continue to socialise.
Yeah. So would you say it was a welcoming, friendly scene?
Very much so, yes.
And some of these social activities, I understand, you'd hold social events in your house. I mean, maybe social events is a bit of a formal way of putting it, but you'd have people around for dinner.
I had parties in my house. I had people around for dinner. I've always been a bit of a hostess, and yes, I did have parties in my house.
Just quickly, we'll go to this point that you raised earlier on about your roles in the SWP. If we can bring up, this is the first report we've obtained by Trevor Morris that references you, and the reference is UCPI 28336. Sir, it's at tab B2. And this is a nominal, what's known as a nominal and up-to-date pro forma on you from the 14th of April 1992. B, at this point, were you in a relationship with Trevor Morris, do you think?
Sorry, what was the date?
It's 14th of April 1992.
Yes.
Yes.
But very early days,
right.
Yes.
It reads, it says of you, B was the first non-member of the SWP to be employed in the SWP print shop, East End Offset. However, recently she's joined the Hackney South branch. She's been put in charge of publicity of Marxism as pertains to advertisements in the written media. This particular position enhances her regular work as the telesalesperson for the print shop. Although the subject is active in the ANL, her membership of the SWP would seem to be more pragmatically based than ideologically, believing her employment is more secure as a party member. So, B, if we just go first to this suggestion that you've been put in charge of publicity of Marxism as pertains to advertisements in the written media. What do you have to say about that?
There wouldn't have been many people in Marxism if I was in charge of the publicity. I have no experience in publicity, and I mean, I'd only just joined the party. He even, says that I think it was March. I know it was March 1992. I attended my first meeting.
Yes.
I'm not sure I was even. So I'd just become a member at that point. So I just become a member and immediately become responsible for all the publicity in Marxism. I mean, that would be some promotion. There's something else in that I find really offensive. That I was not ideologically. That I joined for sort of pragmatic reasons for my career. So wrong in so many ways. For one thing, it was only a casual job. It wasn't what I wanted to do for life. I went to university to train as a social worker soon after that. I knew I was going to do that. So it wasn't like I was looking for a career. I was just, it was just a temporary thing. And I mean, I have thought a lot about why would he say that? And I think maybe he was sort of trying to protect me in some way.
Right.
That he had a relationship and we were very fond of each other. And maybe by kind of distancing me from these terrible socialists, made the relationship more palatable for him, or more excusable. That's the only way I can understand how he would say that.
Yes, thank you. So I understand from your witness statement you might have helped out a bit with publicity, but to say you were head of publicity is inaccurate. Is that right?
Yes.
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 I'd just like to bring up another report now, B, which is UCPI 28309. So it's at tab B3. And this is an event pro forma, as it's called, dated the 29th of April 1992. And it's regarding the SWP May Day rally. And it reads, the party has paid £33,000 for the rental of the premises, but certainly a mistake was made by Privacy when he waited until last Thursday to inform the media officer, B, to enter the rally in free listing publications. So this is very close in time to the last report, and it's just a couple of weeks later, and now you're described as the media officer. What do you say about that?
I mean, there's obviously an amazingly fast promotion opportunities in the SWP. When if I've joined like a week before and I'm suddenly the media officer, again, I'm wondering where that comes from, why he would say that. And I'm wondering whether he feels that to be going out with the media officer might be, maybe his mind has said, well, why are you going out with this insignificant person? And suddenly I'm promoted to media officer in his mind. It's fictional, but also sort of funny.
B, moving on, I'm actually going to look now at a report from another officer that we know as HN90, who gave evidence last week. And I'm bringing it to your attention because you are recorded as having attended this event that he reports on. The report references UCPI 19959. So it's at tab B5. And this is a report from HN90 dated the 3rd of August 1992, and it's on Marxism 92. And this took place, I understand, between the 10th of July 92 and the 17th of July 92. And he describes it as a week of lectures, debates, discussions. Is that broadly correct?
Yes.
Now, you're listed as an attendee on page 34B. Do you recall this event?
Well, I've been to Marxism many, many times. It's a festival of socialist ideas. It's a wonderful event. It includes like music, poetry, lectures, discussions. That would have been my first Marxism. And although I can't remember any particular details, I've always been very excited by that festival.
Right. Okay. Well, I just want to read you a couple of extracts. You may not recall well enough to be able to comment, but I would like you to, if you can, recall what took place. If you are able to comment on them, then please do. The first one is it's on page 2, paragraph 6, and this is under a heading racialism. And HN90 writes, racial issues were given a high profile this year with numerous meetings centred on the role of black people in society. The LA riots gave particular inspiration to the notion that black people were rising up to change the society which had oppressed them for so long. The party line stressed the importance of converting that anger away from white society and into a class anger against capitalist society. Blacks and whites had to be made to unite to defeat the system that oppresses them. Are you able, B, to comment on the accuracy or otherwise of that description?
Can you just put it up again? Sorry.
Yes, sorry, it's...
Yeah,
Have
if
you
you
got the
could just leave
references
that
up?
while
Yeah.
I'm commenting on it. There's always a sort of different themes in meetings. So there might be like a number of meetings on women's issues, a number of meetings on issues of race, on in industrial or whatever is the topic of, that people are most passionate about at the time, and this year's Marxism, which I went to recently, there was a number of meetings on Palestine, for instance. Right. So yes, there would have been a number of meetings. However, this sentence at the end, blacks and whites had to be made to unite in order to defeat the system that oppresses them. That's a very loaded sentence, isn't it? Had to be made to unite, as if black people and white people have nothing in common and had to be, had to be sort of dragged together. That is not the way we see society at all. We look at things in terms of class rather than race or gender, or that it's everybody's interest, that the interests of the working class or anybody but the ruling class is the same for everybody, and it's important to unite, of course. Rather than identity politics was seen as being divisive, although there is a part religion to help women to find their voice, help black people to find their voice, but it's a class issue. So had to be made to unite is so cynical and so loaded. Doesn't ring true.
B, I want to draw your attention now to another section of the same report. It's on page 4, and it's paragraph 13. And it's under the heading Meeting of Particular Interest. And it's about the quality of British justice. And it reads, again, this year, different campaign groups were given floor time to expound the details of their respective cases and to highlight the different justice meted out to working class people on the one hand and city fraudsters on the other. This meeting had a noticeably more angry tone than other similar meetings in the past. It is as if the number of notorious convictions that recently have been quashed on appeal due to prosecution, in quotes, irregularities, has given rise to the idea that every convicted working class person is in fact innocent because the police fabricate evidence in nearly all cases. Needless to say, the kind of justice that the meeting implied was fair was one that puts policemen and judges up against the firing squad wall without trial and places elected but untrained workers in their place to try and subsequently sentence the ruling class.
I would say he completely misunderstood the meeting. I don't obviously remember that meeting, that's 30 years ago. But up against the wall, this is a non-violent organisation. Nobody was, there was no suggestion of putting people up against the wall. Those terms would just never, ever be used. Although it felt that, that certain elements of the establishment needed to be, more democratic and need to be, to not just be in the service of the ruling class. And what was the other thing that I wanted to mention from that? The idea that every convicted working class person is in fact innocent because the police fabricate evidence in nearly all cases. I mean, there are some cases of social injustice, but that doesn't. But the suggestion that every working class person is innocent is absurd. A misunderstanding, I guess.
Well,
Or he was, providing what he was paid to provide. The narrative is like loaded narrative, because it doesn't look so great if you're reporting about something that doesn't involve, that if you he had to imply that there was inherent violence, because he was getting paid a lot of money for this position. That's all I can say.
Thank you. B, we're going to move now on to Welling. Now, I'd like to bring this up just to help orientate you and us. It's the map at UCPI 37118. If we could just go to the bottom of page 3. Sorry, sir, it's tab C1. The bottom of page 3, this is just to show that the map is from 1993. That's when it was published, so at the time of Welling. And if we can go to page 4 and scroll about a third of the way down. My screen's not actually working, but I hope if you can't make sense of what I'm saying, B, please let me know, and I'll get my own copy of the map. But page 4, about a third of the way down, can you see Welling? It's there, just south of the river. Just the area broadly. I don't worry about it.
Yes, I'm not familiar with the South East London at all,
Fine.
but yes, I see Welling there, yes.
So Welling's south of the river. Thamesmead is directly north. Can you see Thamesmead? Just up there again is an area. It's just the other side of the river.
Yeah.
I'm just identifying that because in February 1991, that is where Roland Adams was killed. He was 15 years old, and he was waiting with his brother at a bus stop, and he was stabbed in the throat and died. So close to Welling. Then if we look at to the sort of southwest, or to the left of Welling, we've got Eltham, or Eltham, I'm not actually quite sure how to pronounce it. Eltham can you see that there?
Yes.
And specifically, Wellhall Road. In July 1992, that's where Rohit Duggal was murdered outside a kebab shop by a group of white youths. And one of the youths, Peter Thompson, who was convicted for his murder, was carrying BNP leaflets on him. And then on that same road, less than a year later, on the 22nd of April 1993, that's where Stephen Lawrence was murdered, and Dwayne Brooks was attacked by, again, a gang of white youths in a racist murder. So I'm just doing that, B, just to show that these murders took place in areas surrounding the BNP bookshop in Welling. This so-called bookshop, it was on Upper Wickham Lane in Welling. Do you understand that?
Yes.
To be correct.
I never saw the headquarters, but yeah. Yes, I was aware.
And had been there since 1989.
Yeah.
And was it your understanding or your belief, B, that its location, that the fact of this spate of racist murders and the fact of the bookshop were linked, in the sense that it was emboldening, its presence there was emboldening racists in the area?
Of course, and frightening black people in the area. There's no way that could be a coincidence. Look at the proximity to the BNP headquarters. There's got to be a link there, hasn't there?
Yeah. What was your understanding, B, of the reasons for the Welling March of the 16th of October 1993? What had prompted it? If that's not a...
Well, it was prompted by the racist murders, and it was prompted by, this. It was called a bookshop, but I don't understand. I don't think it was. I think it was a headquarters, really. The presence in in an area, in any area, would not be tolerable. But when there was this spate of racist attacks, of murders, there is definitely a link. So we were there to like, firstly, to show solidarity with the Black population there. You know, you're not on your own. You know, people do care. And secondly, to attempt to show a demonstration of strength, sufficient enough in numbers to put pressure on the local authority to close down the headquarters.
Yeah. Yes, because my understanding is that up until then, Kenneth Clarke had said it wasn't possible, like efforts to get it closed down had failed. Is that right?
Yes, but I'm sure that a way could have been found to close it down. Yeah.
Was it your understanding at all that there was a plan to burn the bookshop down?
Absolutely not. That would be, I mean, nowhere in the history of the SWP is there any suggestion of arson being, of violence, let alone arson. I also understand that it was fortified like Fort Knox, and it's not like something that you can go up to, open the letterbox and shove some petrol down. That would be absolutely absurd and completely counterproductive. We were there to show solidarity and to show numbers, that how many people were on the side of fairness and peace, and not on the side of hatred and division, as the BNP were.
And were you aware of any plans by the SWP to riot or to foment a riot?
I mean, that would have been, the SWP was quite disciplined. You know, that would absolutely have not been a part of anything. I know, like, for instance, like that no investigation had shown a link between demonstrations where there'd been rioting and the SWP. For instance, the poll tax riot. You know, there was an investigation to which attempted to link the SWP to that violence, and no link was found.
And did you hear of anyone who planned in the SWP who planned to physically attack members of the BNP if they came across them?
Not in the SWP. I mean, there may have been splinter groups, but definitely not in the SWP. That was, or the ANL. Those were mass mobilizations, peaceful, open groups, and that would, and you know, we were not violent. We were not trained in violence. We had no history of violence. We weren't criminals. So no, absolutely.
Were you privy to any jokey comments or throwaway comments about burning down the bookshop or destroying the bookshop?
Not me personally, no. Not me personally. I mean, who knows if people are in the pub and have had a few drinks, if someone might say, oh, we should go and do this. But, you know, that I was certainly not privy to anything like that. And I also find it hard to believe. And also, I think Chris Banbury would not have been involved in that because he was the Central Committee.
Yeah, thank you. B, we'll go to your experiences on the day. Well, actually, just before that, were you aware, before you went on the march, that the march route had been diverted, that there'd been a Section 12 notice forbidding the progress of the march actually past the bookshop? Were you aware of that in advance?
No.
No.
Because
right.
I didn't know that.
So when you went, you thought you would be able to, the march would be going past the bookshop. Is that your understanding?
I think so, yes.
Right. Now, you were there, weren't you, B?
Yeah, I was definitely there, yes. And I was there without the children.
Sorry?
I was there without the children.
Without your children.
Yeah.
By this point, so this is the 10th of October 93, were you no longer in a relationship with Bobby, with Trevor Morris at this time?
No, I don't think so. We were still friends.
Right.
But I don't think we were,
Right.
I think the relationship had ended by then.
Did you go to the march together?
No.
Did you go with a group of people?
Yes, I would have gone with my local branch.
Right.
Yeah.
And was Chris Banbury in that group?
I don't remember.
Okay. Can you remember how you got there? Can you remember which station you came into?
I can't remember that. I'm sorry.
Don't worry, it's a long time ago.
It was.
Were you surprised when you arrived by the numbers who were there, the number of people who turned up?
I mean, we had worked quite hard to build that. You know, we were, we were, promoting it amongst the whole community, and there was a lot of different organisations as well there.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't just the SWP and the ANL. There was a lot of organisations and trade unions building for this march.
Sure.
So I had expected it would, and also I think there'd been other smaller marches, hadn't there? So there was a lot of build up for them, and there was people were really upset by those murders, and there was no end in sight to them.
Yeah. I'll bring up the map again just to help with my questions. Again, it's reference UCPI 37118. Page 7, please. This is C1, sir. That, again, shows that this is a map from 1993. And then if we could move, please, to page 9, the bottom quarter of the map. If you look B at the map square that sits just above the letter B at the bottom, can you see what I'm talking about?
No, because there's a M25 main road, A to Z, in the front of it. Oh, so, I'm sorry, I'm not sure what I'm looking at.
No, sorry. I mean, it is confusing, and I actually don't have it. I think it's page 9. So the bottom quarter, there's a letter B on the bottom row.
Oh, okay, right.
And if you look just above there,
yes.
Can you see that shows? I think it shows the junction.
Upper Wickham Lane.
Yeah, of Upper Wickham Lane, Oakhampton Crescent, and Lodge Hill, and you can see Plumstead Cemetery sort of in between the V. Now, can you explain, I mean, use the map if it helps, B, but from what you recall, your progress on the day, on the march, can you explain what you experienced?
So what I remember was that I think we met on Upper Wickham Lane.
Yeah.
And there was a large number, it was a huge march, like 50 or 60,000 people. Yeah. And we walked down the lane, and then, I mean, it wasn't a lane, it's a big road. Yeah. But, and then at the front, I think I was like somewhere in the middle of the march. I don't think I was at the front or the back, because I'll just tell you what I remember, and I don't really remember anything else. That at a certain point, the junction was cut off by a row of sort of heavily armed riot squad, sort of police officers and police horses. Yeah. And like suddenly there was sort of fear and pandemonium. And Julie Waterson, who had a megaphone, was asking people to sit down. She was always very good at sort of calming or clarifying the situation. Yeah. You know? And I do love a sit down march, you know, partly because you've been marching for a while, but also because, you know, it's kind of both powerful and passive, and you get to chat to people, and that didn't last very long. I think we sat down, but almost immediately the horses started charging. We were forced down to the left, right, which must be that road, Lodge Hill. And Lodge Hill. Yeah. And I just remember running and then jumping into the cemetery, climbing a wall and jumping the cemetery, and just being immensely relieved, because it was terrifying. And the people who didn't manage to jump over the wall into the cemetery were getting beaten up. So I think I was lucky, but it was really terrifying. Not the most terrifying march that I've been on in my life, because I was at Geneva in 2001 where somebody was killed.
Yeah.
But always my experience of marches is the less police officers there are, the quieter and calmer they are.
Right.
And in fact, I remembered sort of during the in the the years of the Labour government, where the sort of community policing became much more was promoted, rather than the Met. So often, like you would go on demonstrations and there'd hardly be any police officers, and if they were like friendly community police officers, and there was never any violence. So just the presence of a large number of police officers, I think in itself, or in the case of Geneva, the army, it just in itself causes the violence, not the demonstrators.
Can I ask you this then, B? So when you approached this junction, was there a change in the mood then? Did it change from being a certain kind of march to a very different kind of experience?
Of course, yes.
Your experience?
It went from peaceful but passionate, to chaotic and frightening, terrifying, really.
And I mean, obviously it was chaotic, so it would have been hard to understand quite what was going on. But at the time, did you have any understanding of why it suddenly became so chaotic? Did you attribute that to the fact that people had nowhere to go, or to the actions of the police, or to a sudden hostile mood taking over? What did you understand to be the reasons for that sudden chaos?
The actions of the police, and the fact that we were hemmed in, because not only did they block the route that the march planned to take, but then they blocked off the exit. So we went down the Lodge Hill, and that was blocked off as well. So it was a kettling situation, but kettling of a massive amount of people. With only one exit. I think there was houses on the other side, and so that really was only one exit, was into the cemetery.
And when you say you had to jump over a wall, can you explain why you did that? So why were you driven to take that action, as it were?
I think that was where I can't remember why that seemed to be the place to go for safety.
And you said earlier that people were being attacked by whom? Who was attacking whom?
Well, the police were charging. The police were charging on, where they blocked off the road. Right. And blocking the other side. I'm not sure whether they were charging from the other side as well. Right,
okay. And did you witness, what else did you see the police doing, if anything? I mean, apart from the mounted police, were there police on foot as well?
Oh, yes. Yeah. I mean, they were truncheoning people. There was blood everywhere. The people who I didn't stay to kind of see the battlefield. I think that we sort of got away as fast as we could through Rumstead, but I could certainly see people, definitely the police horses charging and so on.
So you saw the police horses charging, but are you saying you didn't witness people being truncheoned by the police?
I did witness at the beginning of it, but I didn't see the sort of at the end where people described where people were lying seriously wounded. I'm afraid I wasn't. Right. I don't remember that. I wasn't there.
On to another topic, but it's linked. You say in your witness statement about Trevor Morris, I don't think we need to go, but if you want to look at it, do tell me and I'll bring it up. But you say about him that I believe he agitated violence on behalf of the police at Welling. Can you elaborate on what you mean by that?
Well, in his statement, in his witness statement, he claims to have been the person to have given this, what I consider fictional intel, so-called, that there was this plan to burn down the BNP headquarters. That's the only, so I was there. So obviously I feel very strongly about it. I remember how terrified I was. But the fact that he claims this information as his own, it's the only part of the statement where I definitely, not only does he say I was part of spying on this campaign, but I did this and I gave this intel, and that he seems proud of it. And I therefore think that if that's true, that that's the information that he gave to his minders, then I hold him responsible for the injuries, the terrible injuries that day. 72 people, I think, including 12 police officers, were injured. I think were injured to the extent that they had to go to hospital, or not just cuts and bruises, but were seriously injured.
So if I understand you correctly, you mean that because he exaggerated the threat, it led to this over-policing, this aggressive policing, which then led to the chaos?
I think he made up the threat because
Right.
It's completely inconsistent with anything that I know and of anything that the SWP would do. So I do hold him responsible, and I just wonder how conflicted he must feel about that. I know that he was living as his inauthentic self in his other identity as this spy, and I know that there must have been an awful lot of internal conflict, but I can't see how he can not, how he seems proud of this, of doing this, of being responsible for this. It's beyond belief.
In your opening statement, you comment that the only person you know who went weaponised to any demo was Bobby himself, who I seem to remember was always armed with a sharp umbrella, which I know at least one comrade pulled him up about.
Yes.
So does it follow from that you attended demonstrations with Trevor Morris when he brought with him a sharp umbrella?
That was, well, that was information from that I heard from another
Right, okay.
comrade.
So not something you saw yourself. And yes, don't mention the comrades.
I have said I understood this rather than that I saw
fine.
this.
Okay, so this is... But can I just ask, just briefly, so the comrade had seen this?
Yes, and had told him that he shouldn't be doing this.
But was it his understanding that this was being used as a weapon, this sharp umbrella? What was the reason for him bringing it with him?
I don't know.
Fine.
I don't know, but it could be seen as one.
Fine. I'm just wondering if that's a convenient time for a break, or is it a bit earlier? Just 'cause I'm about to move on to another topic.
Yes, and the next topic I think is going to take a little time.
Exactly.
Yes. We normally have a break of 15 minutes in the middle of any morning session to enable the transcriber to have the breaks which she need. We're going to have that break now. Would you be ready to resume again in 15 minutes' time?
Yeah.
Thank you. Then we'll break for 15 minutes.
B, we're going to move on to a new topic now, which is your relationship with Trevor Morris, who you knew as Bobby. Is it correct that you met around March 1992?
I'm pretty sure it was actually my birthday in March 1992,
Right.
my 32nd birthday.
Okay. And you met at your first SWP meeting, is that right?
Yeah.
And that was the Dalston branch.
Yes.
And you said it was a memorable date, it was your birthday. And also, I understand that this was the first time you'd gone out without your children since your marriage had broken up. Is that correct?
Yes, I didn't have any babysitters or any options for a night out. So,
Yeah.
yes.
But this night you had arranged babysitting so you could go out. So it was quite a big deal for you going out.
It was.
Can I ask, what was your emotional state at this time in your life?
Well, I was in. I don't count myself as a vulnerable person. I think I'm a very resilient and a strong person. But I was in probably the most vulnerable point of my life. I'd left a relationship, marriage, which had become where there had been domestic violence ultimately, just 6 months before. And I don't want to elaborate on
No.
that because of out of respect for my children.
Absolutely. But you were feeling vulnerable and you'd
Yeah.
just emerged from something very difficult. You say in your witness statement that at this meeting you got talking with Bobby or Trevor Morris. Can I ask how? How did that conversation get struck up? If you can remember.
I mean, it was probably afterwards we all went down to the bar where the meeting was, and everyone was talking to everyone, and I think we struck up a bit of a bond quite quickly. We seemed to. I remember talking quite a lot, and there was a lot of things that it appeared that we had in common, which sadly I understand was kind of a bit of a ploy for undercover officers, was to find things that they had in common, sometimes fictional things, mainly fictional things, with the person that they were using.
Was he friendly?
He was a very friendly person, yes.
And so is it right, if I understand you correctly, that you had a sort of chemistry from the word go? You sort of clicked?
Yeah.
Did you get the impression from this meeting that he was interested in you romantically? Did he give you that impression?
I think he gave me a lift back, and I think the relationship started quite soon after that.
Right.
I don't think that, if not immediately, within the next week or so.
Right. Okay. Do you feel that he instigated the relationship, B, or was it entirely mutual?
He seemed very keen. So, yes, probably.
Right.
I mean, I didn't jump on top of him, but he didn't jump on top of me either. It was a talking, sort of friendly sort of relationship to start with, and entirely consensual. Although I don't believe it was consensual now that I know he was not his authentic self, but someone else.
But at the time, you considered it to be consensual.
Yes.
Now, I understand this was the first relationship you'd had since you'd split up from your husband, since you'd left your husband. So is it fair to say, was this quite a big deal for you entering into a relationship?
It was massive, because I was navigating my way as a single mother. I never envisaged that I would be a single mother. It was not part of the plan at all. And I thought I would never have a relationship again until my children grew up. that no one would be interested in me. So I was very flattered, and it made me feel that I wasn't a sort of no-go area, with my having such young children, and I was physically attracted to him.
Right. You've referred to being in a violent relationship in your marriage. Without asking you to disclose any more about that, did he know that? Had you told Trevor Morris that had happened to you?
I'm sure that I don't remember that conversation, but I'm sure that he would have known that, because we talked about everything.
And can you recall roughly when he would have become aware of that? Was that something you told him before you started a relationship with him, or was it over the course of during your relationship?
I would have thought that, because that was significant, that was how I had got to be where I was at that time. I think that I would have told him very quickly, although probably not presented myself as a victim, because that's not my the way I work. But he would have known. I remember, quite quickly getting talking about quite intimate things. For instance, he told me very quickly that he had children the same age as mine, and that they were also mixed race children. That was his story. He told me that that his family came from Jamaica, and obviously I have a big connection with Jamaica, and had just been living there. So we had those things in common. And obviously, the fact that he was new to Hackney and he was new to the SWP. I think he'd only joined the year before. And obviously I was also a newbie, and we were excited by the politics that were going on.
Yeah, so you felt you had a lot in common.
Yeah.
And so if I understand correctly, you were open with him. You were very open about your background and your feelings generally and your experiences.
I don't know any way but to be my authentic self. I would find it impossible to be someone else or to pretend to be someone else, which is partly probably why it didn't enter my mind that he would not be who he said he was, or that anybody would not be who they say they are. It's beyond my understanding.
Yeah. I just want to bring up his statement, Trevor Morris's. So it's 35076, and it's page 155, paragraph 204A. Now, B, this goes to what he told you about himself, or an aspect of what he told you. If I read the final sentence in that paragraph, so it's the final sentence. He says, I maintained my cover story about having an estranged family in Germany and my intent to get back with my German wife and family. Hence, I believe it was mutually understood that we would keep the relationship at a low level rather than let it develop into something long-term with prospects. And then, if we could just go to paragraph 157, please. Sorry, I haven't put the page number, which is unhelpful. Well, don't worry, I'll read what it says. It says, I had always made her aware that I had been married and had a wife back in Germany that I intended to reunite with. So I did not ever suggest this could be a long-term relationship. And she likewise was of the same view. Now, can I ask you about this? Is this what he told you about his relationship history?
Absolutely not. I would not have got into a relationship with a married man. He told me that the relationship was over because of a sexual indiscretion of his, which I won't repeat because it was really quite shocking, and that his wife had chucked him out. And that it was over. The sexual indiscretion was so great that there would be no possibility of of reuniting. It was quite shocking. I would not, in my vulnerable state, have got into a relationship with a man who intended to get back with his wife. I would certainly not have got into a relationship with someone who I knew was married. I didn't know that he was married.
No.
And the story about the German wife, I think, was completely untrue. Until I read his statement, I was absolutely devastated. I was devastated for his wife, and I was devastated for his children. That was my first reaction when I read that. Oh my God, he was married to somebody that whole time and hardly saw his children, but saw my children. I thought it was sad and shocking.
Jenny actually refers to what he told her about the sexual indiscretion, and she says that he told her that he slept with his wife's sister. Can I ask, is that what he told you? Well, if you don't want to say, don't worry. I don't want to, but
it
just
was along those lines, but worse.
Right. Okay.
It didn't include children, I have to say that.
Right,
I mean,
okay. But it was in the same ballpark as sleeping with his wife's sister.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, when did he tell you about this? At what stage was this, that this information came out?
Not immediately. I think we were, I was kind of in love sort of stage, because I think if he told me that immediately, I would have been very suspicious of him.
Right, yeah.
But we were probably a couple of months into it, and I was really emotionally involved with him.
Yeah. So what was your understanding when you started a relationship with him? What was your understanding of his status? I mean, did you think he was completely single, or did you know that he had an ex-wife? What did you believe to be the situation?
That he had an ex-wife in Germany,
right,
and two children who were the same age as my children, and that he used as a reason for, he wasn't very involved with my children. Sort of retrospectively, I'm so relieved about that.
Yeah.
But he said it was because that my children reminded me of his children, and he found it all very painful because he was because he was away from them and they were in Germany. Yeah. He did disappear one time after a few months into the relationship, and we were supposed to spend the weekend together. And in those days there was no mobile phones or anything. There was just a pager. The person who on the other end of the pager must have got so fed up with me that weekend of phoning and leaving endless messages for him. I didn't know what else to do. I was really worried about him. And then I started questioning myself, because I thought, oh God, actually, what do I know about this man? He'd never taken me to his house. I'd never met anyone in his family. I'd never met any friends of his outside the party. And I suddenly thought, who do I contact to find out where he is? I don't know his colleagues. No one who knew him from the party knew where he was. And it was then, when he did come back sort of on the Monday, and he was just very jovial and brushed it off. He said, oh, you want to see where I live? Oh, of course you can see where I live. Because I was questioning then, not on the basis, are you a spy, but basically, who are you?
Right.
And he took me straight away to his, the place that he lived.
Yeah.
And although there was nothing sort of very personal about his place, it was just a bedsit. Yeah. And I think it was in Tottenham as well. I think I was saying, well, why are you in Hackney and you're living in Tottenham? But he also gave me an address, gave me a phone number in Germany, and said, if you are worried about me and I've had to go abroad, you can contact this number. And I still have that number. I've never actually phoned it. Yeah. I have this probably just a random selection of numbers, because he would know. I'm just not a suspicious person. I just take everyone at face value. And and I see the best in people,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to think that there might be anything suspicious about him. So I was satisfied that when I went on the flimsy evidence that he had a bedsit in Tottenham and an address somewhere in Cologne, I thought, oh, okay, that relieved me. And he didn't do that again. He didn't disappear again.
Right.
But he told me his son had an asthma attack and he had to get in his car and drive over. And, I had small children and I know I would go to the ends of the earth for them. So I accepted that would be the very best reason that you could disappear.
Yeah. And so he did just disappear, is that correct? Like you were expecting him to come around to your flat, but then he just didn't turn up and you didn't hear from him until when?
I think it was the Monday after.
And when you say you were questioning who he was, were you suspicious? What was going through your mind at that time? Were you thinking he was married or that he'd been lying to you about who he was? Can you remember?
I think I just blamed myself, really. I just thought, what am I doing getting so emotionally involved with somebody who hasn't ever taken me to their house, who I actually really, who, although I feel like I know a lot about him because we talked, that actually I don't.
Yeah.
But I would never think along the lines of, is he a spy? I would just...
No, that didn't cross your mind at the
No.
time. Just jumping back, B, just again, you have covered this, but just to make it clear, if you had thought there were a chance that he wanted to reconcile with his wife, would you have entered into a relationship with him?
No, absolutely not.
You mention in your witness statement some other things that he told you about his background, that he lived in Oldham, that his mother lived in Oldham, and that they weren't close. You've talked about...
I can't remember if it was his mother but I think he said his family was in Oldham. I remembered that because it was a place that I know.
Okay. And did he generally... Sorry to interrupt. Did he reveal lots of other bits of information about himself? I mean, was he quite forthcoming?
Not about his sort of childhood and background, just that his family originally was from Jamaica.
Right.
And I think he must have, my immediate question would be, which part? And I think that he did specify what part.
Right.
But he talked more about his experience in Germany. He told me he was a real sort of one for the ladies in Germany.
Right.
And he indicated he'd slept with other women when he was with his wife, and that was facilitated by being a DJ and sort of meeting German women, and that he was kind of a little bit of a being the only black man in the place that he was very popular.
Right. Okay.
But
did he portray that behaviour? Was he boasting when he said that, or was he expressing sort of shame about the way he'd conducted himself, supposedly, in Germany?
I don't think he had any shame about it, no.
Right. If we just look now about the amount of time that you spent together, you say in your witness statement that in the first few months, he spent several nights a week at your flat. Was that most of the week, then, B, that he was staying with you?
Maybe
Was that
like
more?
3 or 4.
Sorry.
Maybe 3 or 4 nights a week, yes.
And you've answered this, but just to clarify, always at your flat, never at his flat.
Yeah.
And would he come over in the evening, in the afternoon? What was the routine, assuming there was one?
Well, the evening, because he didn't really want to be involved with my children, and then he'd disappear in the morning.
Right, before they were out of bed.
Yeah.
Now, don't reveal the ages of your children, obviously, but he says in his witness statement that your children were 4 and 5. But my understanding is that that's inaccurate, that they were younger than that. Is that correct?
Yes.
You also say in your witness statement that your eldest child does remember him being around.
Yes.
So even though he kept a low profile, there was some interaction between him
Yes.
and your children.
Yes.
And would that generally be in the evening?
Yes.
Right.
I don't remember sort of doing family things with him, apart from, that they'd meet him on a paper sale or things like
Yeah.
that. So it was someone who was familiar to them. But, that was another reason, I suppose, why the relationship kind of petered out. That wasn't what I was looking for. I wanted to be with somebody who would be supportive and, interact with the children and help me and do stuff together,
And he very much gave you the impression he wasn't interested in doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we will explore that in a little more detail. You say in your witness statement B that he was familiar with your children, but he didn't develop a relationship with him. So is that essentially this idea that he did see them, he obviously knew who they were, but there was no great effort to bond with them?
No.
You also say in your witness statement that the fact that your children were so small meant that you were not able to go out much, which gave him certain freedoms. Can you just explain what you mean by that?
So I think, normally in a relationship, if, I don't know, he was doing DJing at a party or something like that, I might have gone along, but that wasn't just ever on the cards because I was at home with my children. So, he could sort of, I couldn't, go and look for him. I didn't. When you have small children, you're at home with them.
Yeah. So he was able to sort of go out on the seas without you because you were necessarily quite housebound.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of the progress of the relationship, B, you say that you were very fond of him and that you initially fell in love with him. Can I ask how far into the relationship did you begin to feel you were falling in love with him?
Quite soon, probably. Yeah.
And did you make that clear to him?
He would know that I was into him. Although, I was careful not to make a fool of myself.
But as far as you could tell, he was aware that your feelings for him were deepening.
Well, it was mutual. He was my boyfriend. I was his girlfriend. Everybody knew that we were in a relationship.
Well, that was going to be my next question, is did you feel that this was reciprocated, that he felt the same way?
I did, yes.
And why did you think that? What gave you that impression?
He called me his girlfriend.
But I suppose you felt like you had a close bond. Is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And at this stage, is it correct that you thought the relationship had a future? Is that right?
Yes. In the early days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you ever discuss that with him? Did you ever talk about the future with him at all in this phase?
Not sort of, no, should we move in together or should we get married or no.
Right. Just returning to the incident that you mentioned not long ago, B, this matter of him disappearing for the weekend. Just before that incident, is it correct to say that you trusted him, that part of the reason that your feelings for him were flourishing was because you felt there was trust in the relationship? Is that fair to say?
I had no reason not to trust him. I thought, yeah.
Yeah. And then this incident happened that you've described where you were expecting him to turn up, to spend the weekend with you. He didn't turn up. And so was this the first time that you had any cause to mistrust him or to suddenly ask yourself questions about him as a person and his suitability, should we say?
Yes.
You said when you were talking about this in your witness statement, you said that he calmed you because when you saw him again, you were obviously very distressed. Did you make it clear to him how distressed you'd been?
I did, because I told him I'd phoned up hospitals and things. I mean, whoever operated the pager would have been able to tell him how distressed I was.
And how did he respond to that? Did he take that on board, do you think?
Well, I understood that he did, because he produced a solution quite quickly. Come and see my place. Here's an address. And I was naive. I was naive, and I wanted to believe that, and I naively was satisfied.
You say, the way you describe it in your witness statement, you say he calmed me and invited me to his bedsit in Tottenham to allay my suspicions. So had you expressed to him the fact you were suspicious of him?
I just said, who are you even? It's only when you have a kind of crisis like that you start to ask yourself. At least that's me.
Yeah. And was his I mean, we know that he took you to his bedsit, but also verbally, what did he say? Was he very dismissive? Did he treat it like a joke? Can you remember?
Yeah, I think he just. I think he. I can't remember exactly, but I think he sort of laughed and said, "Oh, of course I'm who I am. You know me," and I wanted to believe that. So
yeah, that's understandable. And the fact of going to his flat did allay your suspicions. Mm-hmm. Can I ask, why did that allay your suspicions? Just purely because you knew he wasn't married? Or what was...
It didn't cross my mind that he might be married, because, he was always around, and because he had this, quite believable story about his ex-wife in Germany and so on. But I don't know. It was just I felt I brought this person into my house and my bed and my home and my family. And I felt I blame myself, because my children were so young, and vulnerable.
But also you'd formed, if I understand it correctly, you'd formed an emotional attachment to him. So it was disconcerting to suddenly find yourself not knowing where he was.
Yeah.
Just touching briefly beyond his relationship with your children, again, you've mentioned this yourself. You refer to a sort of gear change in your relationship, and this relates to his relationship with your children. You mention in your witness statement that you sensed that your children were an annoyance to Bobby, to Trevor Morris. We've talked about this matter of avoidance. Was there anything else he did or said that led you to believe that your children annoyed him?
No, I think it was just a feeling, and that's a very good way of putting it, the gear change. And it probably happened about 6 months into the relationship, where I found that my youngest child used to wake up in the night, and I would sort of take him into the sitting room and kind of try and keep him quiet, and then just suddenly thinking, what am I doing? My child is much more important than than this man. I should be protecting my children from Bobby, not Bobby from my children. And there was definitely a gear change at that point.
Yeah. So you took stock and thought, actually, this doesn't have long-term potential. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah.
Did you discuss that with Bobby, with Trevor Morris, or was it just an unspoken shift?
I think we kind of split up and then just drifted back together again, but in a more casual way.
Okay. And when you say you split, I mean, was that acrimonious at all? Was it, how did that come about? If you can remember.
I think there was tears, or I think it was just like, I can't do this on this level. I need to put my children first, and this relationship is not facilitating me putting my children first. And I think it was kind of, oh, okay then. But, but it wasn't like he was out of my life. It was just a more casual basis, because we still enjoyed each other's company, and we enjoyed each other's intimacy.
Yeah.
So, but it was on a different basis then.
When it changed in this way, did you spend less time with each other? Did it affect the amount of time you spent with each other?
Yeah.
Would he still come round to your flat?
Yes, but
Not as often.
once a week or once a fortnight, something like that.
But
yeah.
still quite regularly.
Yeah.
So.
And we were still friends.
Yeah.
And we were still comrades, and we were, it together in the branch. But I didn't really feel like I was his girlfriend anymore.
Right. Okay. And there were no. Is it fair to say that? I mean, I infer from what you say that it was amicable. That there was no bitterness.
No, I just wanted to put my children first.
Fine. So in a way, a sort of relationship continued, but it wasn't of the same emotional intensity as it had been before.
Yeah.
Okay. In his witness statement, he describes it as an on-off relationship. Actually, no, not in his witness statement. Apologies. That's how he described it to Jenny, as an on-off relationship. Is that accurate? Do you think that's a fair description?
I suppose so. It was on until that time when, as you described, the change of gear happened. And then it was more on-off.
Fine.
Yes.
Okay, for those 6 months. So for 6 months, it was like a proper relationship. Then the following 6 months, more casual.
Yes.
Actually, just something, this is a little bit off topic. Can I just ask, B, when you were with him, did you talk about politics a lot?
Mostly. Because we were both newbies in the party, so it was what had brought us together in the first place.
And did he come across as a convincing, committed socialist?
Well, I think with the benefit of hindsight, I can see that he was quite naive in some ways. He was quite, he wasn't sort of well read about, he didn't really have a great understanding of the left, but he was very interested in the day-to-day, the day-to-day things, the campaigns, the demonstrations, the A&L particularly, because he put a lot of his time into the A&L. So yes, so our retrospectively, I can see that our discussions were probably not as theoretical as somebody who was an impassioned Marxist might present himself. Yes.
You say he never met your family and he showed no interest in that. Was that something, did you ask him to meet your family? Was that something you raised as a possibility?
I probably did, because I'm close to my family, and they didn't live in London though.
Right, fine. And when you say he showed no interest, was that a blank refusal to meet your family, or was it more just a vibe that you got off him?
I think it was probably just a vibe, yes, I can't remember. But it would be unusual that I didn't introduce him to my family.
When you were a couple, in that first 6-month period, did you go to meetings together?
Yeah, it was revolved around sort of politics.
Yeah, and did you go
I didn't really do anything. I didn't really have a social life, just because of, the being... not having much money and being with small children. I couldn't afford to go on holidays and things like that. So, that really was, I suppose, my social life at that time.
Okay, so you'd go to meetings with him and you'd go to the pub after the meetings with him. And would you attend, I mean, I know again, you're saying you couldn't go on many demonstrations, but if you did go on demonstrations and protests, would you go together as a couple?
I mean, I can't actually remember. I mean, a lot of the things that I was involved in, he was more involved in A&L stuff.
Right.
And a lot of the things that I was more involved with much more around community stuff.
Yeah.
So much more kind of local campaigns. I don't remember him, campaigning to keep the nurseries open.
Right.
That wasn't really his mojo. He was more into kind of, the big stuff.
Yeah. I suppose what I'm getting at is, when you went to meetings together, did you go as a couple? Would it have been obvious to the people at those meetings that you were a couple?
I mean, I think everyone knew that we were a couple.
When you say
He
everyone...
had the car. He had the car, so he probably did take me to meetings.
Right.
But we weren't. I mean, that's kind of not really the way people are in that it wasn't. People had relationships. But don't maybe they sat next to each other and did everything together.
Yeah. But in your social scene in that 6-month period, people would have been aware you were seeing each other. Do you think, is that fair?
Yes.
I mean, again, I'm inferring from what you say, the fact he had a car, was that quite a rare thing to have a car?
Yes.
Right. You say in your witness statement, and you've said it earlier in your evidence, B, that from what you saw, Trevor Morris experienced only support and kindness from people in the SWP, and you say that we liked him a lot. You've talked about how you feel, but when you say we, who do you mean? Do you mean your comrades from the branch?
Certainly my friends who were comrades, yes. He was friendly. He had a very engaging smile and engaging laugh. He was quite funny, and I mean he kind of presented himself a little bit like Citizen Smith. For those who are over my age, who might recognise that he wore a sort of a beret and with as I remember, a sort of red star or something, almost like a parody of a revolutionary socialist in a way, and so he was quite funny. He did have a good sense of humour, and that was sort of part of his persona.
Right. That he didn't.
In retrospect, it seems quite cheap, but
so that he didn't take himself entirely seriously. Is that?
Yes, I think so.
B, if we talk now about how the relationship came to an end, the sexual relationship, you say in your witness statement that in the summer of 1993, you met another comrade in the SWP and started a relationship with him. So you stopped seeing Bobby, Trevor Morris.
Yes.
So did you end the relationship with him?
Yes.
And how did he respond to that?
I mean, I think he knew that he hadn't done enough to make the relationship last.
Right. Did he take it well, or did he seem cross?
There was no tears, there was no scene. It was kind of resigned.
Okay.
And maybe, yeah.
No, sorry.
I mean, we know that from what we've read in his statement, that the relationship seems to have been entirely, that the timing of it will make me very much look as if I was a human shield for him, because he stated that somebody who was related to someone high up in the party had made a pass at him, and then that he had, I'm being careful what I say here, and that he had turned this person down, and they had then accused him of being a spy. I actually totally disbelieve this, because I know that person, and they would, I'm sure, if they had thought that, they would have maybe said, look out here, maybe raise suspicions. But it certainly served him at that point to have a girlfriend in the party. And the indication in his statement is that he told his manager of this incident and this accusation, and that he was quite paranoid. And he'd been told you better sort it out then. And I read that as being, you better get yourself a girlfriend quickly then.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, he says he thinks it was a subconscious factor, that it wasn't conscious, he says. What do you feel about that? Do you believe that?
I think his manager was tacitly advising him to get himself a cover story quickly, and that it served him to have somebody who, like myself, who would be certainly not under any suspicion as cover.
Right. Just very briefly, the person, we won't mention their name, but the person in the SWP who he mentions, he said made a pass at him and accused him of being a spy. Were you friends with that person?
Yes.
And when you say you think she would have said something, do you mean because she knew that you were in a relationship with Bobby, with Trevor Morris?
Yes.
Right. But she never said anything to you?
No.
And you didn't hear on the grapevine that there were suspicions that he was a spy?
I think it may be sort of part of his sort of grandiosity, really.
B, so the relationship ended around the summer of 1993. So that would mean that it had lasted a little over a year. Is that correct?
Yes, with the second half of that time being more of the on-off.
Yeah.
Yeah. But definitely I probably still served the purpose to him.
Right.
Should people be suspicious?
Right. You say that you remained friends, though, after the sexual relationship ended. Do you mean by this, were you friendly when you bumped into him, or would you still arrange to spend time with him socially? How did that friendship work?
No, more of a bumped into thing, really. And also because he then joined another branch. So after a few months, I wouldn't have seen him at the branch. But I do remember, certain events. For instance, there was a rally in Tottenham with the black nationalists. The rally was around Malcolm X. One of our comrades had written a book about Malcolm X, and it was a rally kind of centering around the premise in the book that Malcolm X towards the end of his life was more sort of favourable to move more towards Marxism and away from black nationalism.
Right. Okay, and you remember seeing him on a demonstration?
I think we had a big chat there. Yes.
Right.
So yeah.
Were you aware when he dropped off the scene? Were you aware of that at the time?
So that would have been like 1994.
Oh, sorry.
95.
95 was when he dropped off the scene.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if at the time...
So I'd have seen him at Marxism, but yes, sort of it petered out as he was more involved in a different area and then in a different sort of politics. And I didn't really... I had sort of moved on, and I didn't really have very much to do with him. But I was then really surprised to get a letter from him sent from Egypt in 1995, saying that he'd gone to Egypt and he was. In retrospect, it was bizarre because he said he was sort of working in the bazaars Egypt, and that he wanted to sort of save some money and travel around Africa, and that was consistent with his in the way that his politics had moved. But what was very strange was that it was kind of out of nowhere, because we hadn't really had any contact for the past year at least. And it was only later that I understood that that was something that all the undercover officers were encouraged to do, to sort of send a letter to their ex-girlfriends. It was almost a policy thing, I think, from a different place. Some went to South Africa or Australia, his was from Egypt, genuinely postmarked from Egypt, to give a story. I mean, in his case, it was rather unnecessary because, we hadn't really had any contact for the last year. And I wish I'd kept the letter, but and it was really out of the blue. And I thought, well, okay.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my question, is why did you find it so bizarre? But you've answered it, because you hadn't heard from him for ages, and then to suddenly have a postcard was, you found that odd.
Yeah.
B, if we move now to how you found out that Trevor Morris was an undercover officer. In your witness statement, you refer to a friend being suspicious 10 years ago. And as far as I understand it, they raised those suspicions with you. Is that correct?
They raised the suspicions and also asked me for a photograph. Because the Guardian journalists who were writing the undercover policing book had asked them if this person knew, I think it's Rob Evans, and he asked me for photographs, which I provided. And I honestly didn't think anything more about it, because because I'm just not suspicious by nature, but also because it just seemed too far-fetched that anyone would have a relationship with me on that ground. I was sort of no one in the. I would assume that if you were working undercover, you would have a relationship with somebody who kind of was more in the middle of things, rather than a single mum who'd only just joined the party.
So was that the main reason you thought it was very unlikely, because you yourself were not a prominent person in the SWP, rather than any characteristics, any of the things that your friend considered to be suspicious, for example, like the way he sort of appeared and was very active for a period and then disappeared? Did any of that affect your feelings about whether or not?
I think it's just my nature, really. I think it's just my nature not to be suspicious. Yeah.
Then how did you actually find out, B? When was it confirmed?
So in summer of 2019, I was visited by someone from the Undercover Policing Inquiry, who I actually wasn't in at the time, and a friend was staying in the house, and she said, this guy's come round and he's got a letter and he wants to give it to you personally. So I called, and he'd left a number, so I called a number the next day. And I can't remember if he came round or if it was a phone call, because I was so shocked that it sort of... and he said, I'm really sorry to have to tell you that your ex-boyfriend was an undercover police officer. And I said, was it Bobby? So I did realise as soon as he said that, I knew who it was. But I was utterly gobsmacked and in shock, obviously.
That was going to be my question, that your immediate reaction, was that it? It was just utter shock, is that correct?
And shame, actually, was my first feeling, because I felt stupid that I hadn't realised, even when there were all these pointers, even when I'd been asked directly. And I felt shame because I had inadvertently provided cover for somebody who might have got friends of mine into trouble, who might have told lies about us, about me, about my friends. I didn't want people to know. I felt it made me into a suspect myself. That was my initial reaction. I just wanted to disappear.
When you say you felt it made you a suspect yourself, what do you mean by that, B?
That I'd slept with the enemy.
I see. That you'd been like a traitor, essentially.
Yes.
Right. So, if I understand it correctly, wrapped up with these feelings of shame were feelings of guilt, essentially. Is that correct?
Yeah.
You can see in your bundle, B, that there are a couple of reports on individuals. I don't think we need to go to them, but you are listed. There are these pro formas, nominal pro formas on individuals linked to the SWP, and you are listed on those reports as an associate of these individuals. One of these reports is dated the 14th of July 92, and it refers to someone with a BA from Oxford University. And there's another one from the 3rd of March 92, which refers to someone who's the sales and advertising director from East End Offset. Are these people he met through you?
That's the same person, and my best friend at the time.
Right.
Yes, he fostered that relationship.
So
as he did many others of people that he met who would come round to the house. And when I see the reports that I've very recently seen, where he's reported prurient and unnecessary, sometimes homophobic reports about people that he'd met and befriended in my house, people who would have trusted him because they trusted me.
Yeah.
I felt terrible about that.
You refer also, B, in your statement to something that he says in his witness statement about reporting on members of the SWP who worked in the civil service. And you can think of two people you know who did that.
Instantly.
And again, does this link to this idea of shame that you feel that you exposed these, inadvertently, of course, but exposed these people to Trevor Morris?
Yes, I got pictures of him, in my house talking to these people.
Another emotion you refer to, another response that you had to finding out, was a sense of paranoia and a lack of trust. Can you elaborate on that at all, B? Just how finding out about Trevor Morris made you feel paranoid?
Well, I mean, I think the whole thing is that, the trauma is a journey, isn't it? Like from the start, my first feeling was shame. My second emotion, I suppose, I went through was paranoia and distrust. And I felt I couldn't. My phone was tapped. I wondered whether any sort of suspicion of that somebody may be inauthentic made me wonder who they were, or wonder if they were working for the police. It interfered with a couple of friendships of mine. I thought I was being followed a couple of times. I mean, my whole understanding about, I always thought I belonged to this open organisation. When I'd always thought it was ludicrous to think that there would be people paid to infiltrate us, when your whole basis of the way you understand society to work is turned upside down. Obviously, distrust and paranoia and suspicion are going to be prominent features of your journey.
You also mentioned in your statement that you had concern for the safety of your youngest child. Without going into any details, Bea, can you explain what you meant by that?
Well, I have a younger child who was 13 at the time, who's now 19, and who lived with me. So I just and a wife, and we were all worried about being followed or people knowing where we were, and it's obvious that I would be concerned for the safety of my family, particularly those who were living with me.
Yeah. Did it affect your children? Did you talk to your children about it?
Yes, I would say that. Of course, I did, and I would say that it was radicalizing for them. I didn't believe the state would work in that way. When I found out, now I know, they know now from a much earlier age that's how that this shit happens. Sorry.
Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry. In respect of anger, you say in your witness statement that you're more angry with the British state than actually you are with Trevor Morris. Can you explain that?
That was in my statement. I think my anger for Bobby has grown since then. That's sort of part of my journey. I felt that he had been used, and I felt that his family had been used to start with. That was my initial reaction was, oh my God, his wife, what must she have gone through? What must she still be going through? And his own children and him. But then as time went on and I reread the statement and understood the part that he had played in the social justice campaigns in Welling, particularly in Welling, because he has stated exactly what he told his minders about Welling, and I was there and I know what happened. So I think I do feel that he has been brainwashed in a way to believe that that his allegiance is to the establishment and the state and the status quo, as opposed to his class, his community, and his family.
Thank you, Bea. I just want to take you to a couple of things he says in his witness statement, just to get your response to those. You have actually touched upon this, but it was the fact that when he says that he may have got into the relationship subconsciously to cover up suspicion that he was a spy. I mean, we have covered it, but just to make it clear, how do you feel about that? I mean, do you think that now knowing what you know?
I actually think now he may have got into the relationship consciously as a cover-up,
right,
rather more than unconsciously.
Okay. And how do you feel about his saying that he regrets the relationships he had, as it would have been better if they had not happened, but that he was deep in his alter ego at the time?
Well, firstly, yes, I agree that it would have been better if they hadn't happened. But secondly, you can't hide in an alter ego. You can't go and murder someone and say, oh, sorry, that was my alter ego, not me. It's not an excuse under the law, unless you're actually psychotic at the time. He was had full mental capacity. He may have been conflicted in many ways. He talks about being a functional schizophrenic, which I think is an unfortunate use of language. But he had capacity. He knew what he was doing, and he was still responsible for his own actions.
But you can ask, one of the ways it's affected you, I understand from your witness statement, is that this experience for you was one of the main drivers for your decision to leave the UK. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Can you explain, just in very brief, why it made you feel that way?
I just feel that if the state will go to the extent of sanctioning infiltration at this level of decent people trying to make society better, whilst ignoring organisations on the far right where real hatred and real danger lies, then how corrupt is that society? It was compounded by the whole way that the Labour Party was treated in the 2019 election, the lies and smears that were told at that point. But from the moment that I heard, I said to my wife, I can't live in this country anymore.
We're nearly at the end now, Bea. I just want to ask you this. If you'd known that Trevor Morris was a police officer, would you have invited him into your house?
No. I mean, I don't have a personal problem. I didn't have a personal problem with the police at that point, per se. My grandfather was a policeman. I adored my grandfather. He died not that long before, so he would have known about that. I think there is a part for community policing when they're protecting the community, but not when they're protecting the ruling class and the capitalist system, which has wrought so much destruction on the planet and on society, that's divided the rich and poor, where we see all the time that we were vindicated to say capitalism can't work. It's a poisonous system.
If you'd known Trevor Morris was a policeman, and I should have said working undercover, would you have introduced him to your children?
Oh my gosh, no, of course not.
And if you'd known that Trevor Morris was a police officer working undercover, would you have started a relationship with him?
Absolutely not.
Bea, I've come to the end of the questions that I have for you today. I just want to ask you, is there anything that you want to raise or anything you want to say to the chair for him to take into consideration?
No, I wasn't prepared to be asked if I had any questions.
Not questions necessarily, but just anything more we haven't covered that you would like to talk about.
Not at this point.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I hadn't realised when we spoke last that you could not see my face. The cameras have not been set up in such a way as to permit it.
I can now.
Hope I can show it.
If you come over here, because I'm not sure she can.
Forgive me, let me try
see
again.
you.
I hope that you can now see me and not merely hear my disembodied voice. We normally have a break of 15 minutes at this time to permit all other core participants who may wish questions to be put to you through Ms Monaghan. Will you bear with us for that 15 minutes and then answer any questions after it, after which your evidence should be complete?
Thank you, yes.
Thank you. Ms Gilroy.
B, would you like to sum up to the inquiry how you feel about being spied on?
Yes, thank you for asking. I mean, it was wrong in so many ways. And I think that the first tranche of the inquiry has already established that it was wrong. But, just to say in some of the ways that it was wrong, I feel that I was used as a human shield. I feel that there was trespass in my house. There was trespass into my family. My right to privacy was completely overridden. I believed that the intimacy between us was unconsensual on the grounds that the person that I was with was not the person who I believed them to be. I believe that it was wrong for that his wife and children were wronged by what happened, and I think that I don't believe that he put me in danger now retrospectively, but I think that in his framing of things, I would have been in danger if he really believed that. I mean, the way he wrote in this kind of cloak and dagger way about. He said, for instance, that had he been not in his statement, but in the Hearn report, he states that his life would have been at risk had his identity been uncovered, which is obviously absolutely ridiculous. I think the one person whose identity was discovered during the relationship, during the period of spying, he was given a stern chat and then disappeared. I mean, it's so ridiculous to think his life would have been in danger. But if he did believe his life is in danger, then would that not put me and my children in danger as well? Would I, not in his cloak and dagger description of his espionage work, would I not have been tarred and feathered? So I think that if he really believed that he was in danger, then he was putting me in danger as well. I don't believe the danger was physical, but I think I was horribly used, and it was just so wrong in every way. In every way, it was indefensible.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
B, thank you for giving evidence. May I express my personal thanks to you for doing so. You have brought to life, in a way that no end of papers can, the impact of these events on real people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
That concludes this morning's proceedings. We will resume at 2:00.